Hi, I'm Carla with Race to Walk. Thanks for joining me. And today I'm going to be sharing with you my 5 books that I think you should read before you die. But before we get started, a little bit about this channel. Here we share good thoughts about good words, and on Fridays I host a live Bible study on Instagram at Race to Walk, and then I publish 2 videos a week. I publish a replay of that Bible study as well as a video about books. So if you're interested in either of those things, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can get updates about new videos. So 5 books you should read before you die. Now, there's a lot of lists out there. Some people have 100 books you should read before you die. Some have 20. I've looked at some of those. Some of those I'm thinking, yeah, no, not going to read that. Not good. But I did pick 5 books that I think everyone should read. So number 1, the first on my list, I'm sure this won't come as a big shocker if you've watched any of my videos, but the first on my list is the Bible. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think it's important both for Christians and non-Christians. So first, for Christians, obviously, if you say that you're a Christian and you say you've made Jesus the Lord of your life, then you should at least know what he actually said and know the foundation for your faith. And we know that from the Bible. If you've never read the Bible and actually read it all the way through, then how can you really say you have an understanding of what your faith is or what it should be? I used to teach 3rd grade Sunday school, and I would always tell my Sunday school kids that they needed to read the Bible for themselves, because sometimes people would say things were from the Bible and either they weren't from the Bible at all, or they would misunderstand it or misrepresent it. And sometimes people just flat out lie. And you're not going to know if somebody is misleading you if you don't read it for yourself. It's important. Everybody should read it. I have a lot of Bible studies on my channel. And that's why I do it, is because I want people to feel confident about their faith, feel confident about their understanding of the Bible. If you haven't read the whole Bible for yourself, then find a plan and just start. And I don't mean just cherry picking verses from here and there. I mean, you should be reading it cover to cover. If you've been a Christian for any time at all, you should have already read it. This shouldn't be coming as a surprise when I say this. The second thing is for non-Christians. And you may say, well, I just don't believe that. I think it's all a bunch of bunk. And why would I want to waste my time reading the Bible? Well, first of all, there's a lot of different things in the Bible. You might be surprised how much of our society is structured based on principles that are found there. But the one thing I want to point out is that Christianity, it actually makes up 31% of the entire world's population. Christianity is the largest religious group in the world. In the United States, 69% of Americans identify themselves as Christians. Now, you may say, see the way Christians act, so no thank you. I understand where you're coming from on that, because I'm pretty disturbed by that myself. And quite frankly, I think a lot of that has to do with so few Christians have actually read the Bible and don't actually know what they're supposed to believe, which again is why I think everyone should read the Bible. But I will say that even if you're not a Christian yourself, if you're in any position of leadership, whether that's as a manager or if you're in some sort of official position, you should read it, because you need to know what it is that this huge percentage of the population actually believes. How can you possibly understand where they're coming from if you don't know what it says? Now, I will agree that some Christians have a very warped understanding of what it means, again, because a lot of them haven't read it themselves, but you should at least know the foundations. Second, I don't know how you can possibly call yourself an informed reader if you haven't read the Bible, because the Bible has influenced the past 2,000 years of Western thought and literature. You cannot possibly understand almost any literature or any writer or thinker if you don't understand the Bible, because it informed their thought. What they thought and believed was shaped by what the Bible says. If you haven't read the Bible, you will miss references that the writer is making because you don't get the biblical reference. You will miss entire layers of meaning because you don't understand where they're coming from. Even simple references. A few years ago, it's more than a few years ago, this is a while ago, I was reading a discussion, well, it's kind of more like an argument on an internet forum. Imagine that. Somebody was basically kind of signaling that they were done, that they weren't going to discuss it anymore, and they said pearls before swine. And the person they had been arguing with said, "Are you calling me a pig?" And I was like, oh my gosh. I was thinking, I seriously hope you were joking. But I don't know. I don't know if the person was just being funny or if they seriously didn't get the reference, because that's from the Bible. Pearls before swine is a metaphor for the futility of throwing things of value in front of people who can't appreciate it. Anyway, this person that said it they're usually pretty funny, so they might have just been joking, but I really have no idea. They may have been serious. I don't know. I couldn't tell. So the point is, go get a Bible and read it. The second book on my list of 5 books you should read before you die is The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. Now, this book is actually on a lot of lists as one of the most significant works of the 20th century. It was written by C.S. Lewis in 1943, so it was in the middle of World War II. And the point of the book is that Lewis is trying to get his fellow academics to see that there is no absolute truth and absolute standard for right or wrong outside of man, that there basically is no hope for man. That what it will devolve to is basically might makes right. And that if there is no absolute truth, then people can make their own truth, their own right and wrong, and then you don't have any standard or any basis for condemning what anyone else wants to do. So that was Nietzsche's argument, that it's this will to power, that you make what you want to happen. So this was Lewis's argument. He was arguing against relativism. It's more like an essay rather than a book. It's very short, but it is a very dense read. But if you haven't read it before and you're just reading it now for the first time, you are in luck, because last year, Dr. Michael Ward, who you may know from Planet Narnia, he published a book, which is basically a guidebook to the abolition of man, called After Humanity. And he just goes through, basically paragraph by paragraph, explaining what Lewis meant and some of the different references, because when you read through it, you realize that Lewis is actually throwing some shade in a couple places in that. But since you don't know the references, you miss it when you're reading it. I read The Abolition of Man when I was in the apologetics program. It used to be that the abolition of man was something that everyone in the apologetics program, whether they were cultural or philosophical, read. That's not true anymore. Don't ask me why. I don't know. I think it's unfortunate. But anyway, we read it and we had a lot of discussion about it. And that kind of helps, I think, with understanding. Even still, it was really meaty. It was hard to get a grasp on. This, especially if you don't have a group to go through and discuss it with, After Humanity is such a great resource to read through it, and so you can really get an understanding of it. So my recommendation to you is to get a copy of The Abolition of Man as well as After Humanity. Go through those together, and then you can get a copy of our first issue of An Unexpected Journal, which was on the abolition of man, and so you can see the application of what Lewis was saying in Abolition of Man. And as far as the journal, you can go to the website and read our essays for free, or if you sign up for the newsletter, you can get a free digital copy, or you can buy a print version if you prefer that. But anyway, Abolition of Man is number 2 on my 5 books that everyone should read before they die. My third book on my list of 5 books you should read before you die is 1984 by George Orwell. Now, are these my favorite books of all time? Probably not, but these 5 books that I'm picking now are books that I think are significant and speak into the time that we're in right now. So 1984 used to be, I'm assuming it still is, it was a book that pretty much everyone in the United States read when they were in high school. I read it, my daughters read it, but I'm beginning to think that there were a lot of people that skipped English class, because I've seen posts on social media where people are using a term or a phrase in the exact opposite way of the way it was meant in the book. The irony of that should not escape you. This actually ties into The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. So Lewis wrote The Abolition of Man in 1943. Then in 1945, he wrote the third book of his space/cosmic/ransom trilogy, and that book is That Hideous Strength. And That Hideous Strength is a fictionalized representation of what Lewis was discussing in The Abolition of Man. So Abolition of Man, That Hideous Strength tie together. George Orwell read That Hideous Strength. He liked the book, but he did not like the supernatural parts. Those bothered him. And I do have a review on That Hideous Strength where I mention all this. But later, in 1949, George Orwell wrote 1984, and really he's talking about the exact same thing that Lewis is talking about in The Abolition of Man. The thing is, Orwell did not acknowledge God. He did not acknowledge that there was a God outside of space and time. He was looking for redemption for humanity in humanity itself. And the message that he comes up to, which is the same point that Lewis is making in The Abolition of Man, is that if there is nothing outside of humanity that is a standard or that we can look to for redemption, then there is no hope. There is no hope. So read all those. Read The Abolition of Man. Read That Hideous Strength. Read 1984, and you'll see what I'm saying. Orwell actually makes Lewis's point more powerfully than Lewis does himself. He does. So the fourth book on my list of 5 books you should read before you die is Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. And Till We Have Faces, I do have a review on this on my channel. It's one of my favorite books. I would say it's my favorite book by C.S. Lewis, but it's really tied for me with The Great Divorce. Love that book too. It's really hard for me to choose between the two. But one of the reasons that I chose this book is that the point of Till We Have Faces is that Lewis is illustrating how we don't even have a true picture of who we are ourselves until the Holy Spirit reveals that to us and sanctifies us. Till We Have Faces, it comes from a line in the end of the book where the main character says, "How can we see face to face until we have faces?" And that is a reference. You gotta know the Bible to know this reference. That is a reference to a verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, which is known as the love chapter, where Paul is writing, "Now we see as through a glass darkly, but then we shall see face to face." But I think what this book speaks to is a problem that we have in the United States today, and this is the huge problem, is that we have so much tribalism that we have decided that we are determining what is right or wrong based on the group we identify ourselves with. I could list so many different examples of this. We can condemn something in a person that's not part of our group, but we will excuse it in someone that's in our in-group, right? You know, I've talked to a lot of Christians over the past couple of years that have said they just feel really detached. And, you know, I felt that way myself. And I know that's a hard thing. It's not an easy thing to go through. But I think in the end that that's a good thing, because you know what God is doing is he's breaking those connections off. We've allowed the groups that we are a part of to define us a lot of times, rather than letting God show us who he has made us to be. And it hasn't been easy, but I think that in the end, if we really submit to the Holy Spirit, that it will turn out to be a good thing. The fifth book on my list of 5 books you should read Before You Die is The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck is one of my favorite authors. I love his more well-known books like The East of Eden and The Grapes of Wrath, but The Moon is Down is my favorite. And I think it's because that he shows that even people that we think are our enemies are still human beings. The story behind The Moon is Down, I've read that Steinbeck was contracted to write the book as a form of propaganda to distribute in countries that were occupied by the Nazis during World War II. And it so resonated with particularly the Norwegians because they saw the book as placed in their country, that John Steinbeck was actually awarded King Haakon's the 7th Freedom Cross for the book. And it is a story that's designed to inspire people to stand for freedom no matter what the oppression is. But Steinbeck does it in a way that he never dehumanizes the people that he is encouraging the oppressed to oppose. Still see this occupying force as human beings. And I think that that is really an amazing thing. And to me, the point of the book is that just as we don't truly know who we are until the Holy Spirit reveals it to us, we don't really see other people for who they are either. We don't know the situation the other person is going through. We don't know where they've been or what has brought them to this place. To me, The Moon is Down is a reminder of that. So those are my recommendations. I think the common thread through all of them is that truth is important. And it's only when we cling to truth and are willing to let go of the lies that we can not only truly see ourselves for who we are and who we're meant to be, but we can truly see others and be in community with them. But anyway, those are my 5 books that I think you should read before you die, and let me know what your thoughts are. What are your 5 books that you would recommend to someone that they should read no matter what? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.